What's up guys, this is Professor Spawn. In this tutorial we are going to learn about what are variables and how do we declare variables, right? So a variable is the basic unit of storage in a Java program. A variable is defined by the combination of an identifier, type, and an optional initializer. In addition, all the variables have a scope which defines their visibility and the lifetime. Perhaps basically you can think of any programming language, and the first thing you should really know that how do you define a variable, right? And it is basically the fundamental to a programming language. So a variable is a named memory location that may be assigned a value by your program, right? A value of a variable can be changed during the course of the execution of the program. And the next program shows, so the program we are going to write, or the next program we are going to write, is going to show how does a variable is declared and how it is assigned. As you can see on my screen, I have already assigned one variable, which is in speed is equals to 300. Like I said, that a variable has a type and identifier along with the value, right? So here if you see, the speed is basically an identifier. It's like it is saying that the name of the variable is speed and the type of the variable speed is of integer, right? And it has a value of 300. This 300 is also called as literals in Java. Basically, literals are a constants which you assign to a variable, right? So this is a valid variable, right? And also you can, even if you don't assign a value to a variable, it's still fine in Java, right? Like I have declared a variable which is int age and it's still valid, right? Along the same line, you can also define a variable which is like string, and I can name this as name, and I will name this as Professor Spawn, and this defines a variable of type string with an identifier of name and with a literal. This is basically called a string literal of values Professor Spawn, right? In the similar fashion, you can define double pi is equals to 3.14, right? And also you can define float. Let's say I'll define this float as interest is equals to 12.0. Remember, if you don't, so what's the difference between this double and float is this suffix f, right? So either you can have a small f or you can have a capital F, but I suggest to have capital F because it's one of the standard practices. So what's the difference between this double and float? Like we have seen in the theoretical aspect, a double is a double point precision type, but a float is a single point precision type, right? So these are the various ways you can define the variables. Also, Java follows certain naming convention for defining a variable. All these variables we have defined is valid, right? Let's say that I have a variable name which is vehicle speed. If you want to define that that variable name with a vehicle and speed, like there are two terms, so there is a way in Java you use camel casing, right? So I'm going to define int vehicle speed is equals to, I'll define this as 250. So if you have, let's say, like in the above example, we have interest, a single word, and we have name, but let's say that it's a mixture of two words, which is vehicle speed. So when you read this, right, you basically understand, okay, this holds a value for a vehicle speed. And to have a proper naming convention, this is called as camel casing naming convention. Camel casing naming convention, right? So these are some ways where you can define a variable. You can assign the value to a variable. Even if you don't assign the value, it's still a valid variable, right? So in the next tutorial, we will see about what are literals, right? And also we will see that how the variables play an important role in the execution of the program. Till then, goodbye.